Rebecca, can you hear us okay on there?
Yes, just starting my camera. Thank you.
Rebecca, is this your inhaler or is it mine? Left at the last meeting?
I don't think it's mine because I found both of mine. And mine,
Oh.
is that yellow? That must be yours.
It looks like something I would also be using, so perhaps it's mine. There was a note here that said it was for you, but you and I were sort of next to each other and maybe I left it. So anyway, I'll take it. And then if I have one, I'll just maybe toss it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Now, when it's time to do the minutes, I have an update. I've been working with, I think your name is Kristen at the city
Yes.
clerk's office. So I have an update to tell everybody kind of what's going on with everything.
Oh, sounds good. Okay, let me see. Who do I have? I have Rebecca. Who else is anyone else on the screen or on the shows 5 participants? Okay. What's that? Okay. Okay. Michael, Nancy. All right. Hi, Nancy. And then no Amy. Okay. Okay. Well, I will then just go ahead and call the meeting because I have Glenn, I have me, I have Nate, Crystal, Rebecca. So we have a quorum. So I will just call the meeting at 5:30 on the dot. Thank you all for being here. And I think the first item is public comment on non-agenda items. I know we have a public member. Are you here to just visit or do you have a comment on non-agenda items? Okay. Glad you're here. Glad you're here. All right. Then, yeah, the minutes. Let's talk about the minutes, Rebecca.
Yes, ma'am. I have gotten March, April, and May's transcribed and sent to Miss Crystal. She just edits it and comments, and then I look it over again is the process. So those are all done. So they should be coming up hopefully by next month for vote. The only two I haven't got done, I'm working on February 9th special meeting and the February regular meeting, and those hopefully I can get done so we can just knock them all out and be, just current.
Okay. Are they saying that there's a specific format you need to be following or we need to be?
Yes, there's a format, and she sent me about a month or so ago, like the format, templates and kind of what she wants it to say. And it's just kind of specific, like instead of saying board member Allen, you would say Commissioner Allen. Like you have to not, it's just, I didn't understand how they kind of work. So it's been very helpful, but it's just taking a little bit longer to get it done this way.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I do sort of remember that there we do have to call people by their titles, and that's always learning. So, hi, Leah. Hello. All right, we got every board member here tonight, so that's really cool. Aaliyah's on and Amy's on as well. And Michael, I thought you said he's on. Yep. So I know. What do you mean all? Nope, we've got them all. All right, public comment, open meeting minutes. Okay. We'll move on to like our old business, which is recapping and discussing last week's meeting about the ADU conversation, the accessory dwelling unit. I did want to ask Zach if you had any updates on that timeline.
So the update that I have, Fred did submit for a 6-month extension to DOLA. And as of now, there has been no update, although it has only been a few days. He did reach out yesterday through email, but he hasn't heard back. But regardless of the update, they're continuing to move forward. And so we're able to at least show that we're attempting to comply and moving in the right direction with everything that they're kind of outlining for us.
Cool. So it sounds like sort of this draft ordinance that we had put together back in 2018 potentially could show that you guys are on it,
Yeah.
and then we could have the opportunity to continue to work on it, or should we focus a little bit on tonight on some of the things that we talked about with planning?
We can definitely continue talking. I think there's a little bit of kind of an unknown until we get that update from DOLA on the extension. But yeah, we're showing that we're kind of making progress as well as doing the working sessions between the HAB and the CPC.
Yeah.
So we're doing
Yeah.
kind of a plethora of things.
Awesome. And I bet that makes a big difference just to show we're trying, right? So, so what do the board members think? Should we pull up and look more closely at the chart that planning had put together? Amy Mock, what's up? What's your thoughts?
So after processing the last meeting, I realized that I had the same question as Aaliyah, and I know that it got answered as far as the land use percentage, but I don't really understand it, and I need somebody to explain it to me who has a better understanding.
So is it, Amy, this is in regards to, like, in the original ordinance, we had proposed that the size of the lot be a certain size, right? And that's not relevant anymore? Yeah, okay. So the requirement being passed down by the state is that ADUs be allowed by right. So one of the things that means is that, and Zach, you can correct me where I'm wrong, is that there can't be, within the ordinance, there can't be a stipulation about minimum lot size. So there can be requirements in the ordinance about other things that are already in the zoning code, like setbacks, et cetera. But there can't be a requirement that you have to have a lot of a certain size to be able to build a second unit.
Yeah, there can't be a requirement, and one of the issues with having a requirement is it stops somebody who does have a small lot size but are seeking to maybe turn their garage or an attic space into an ADU, and they kind of lose out. So yes, no constraints on lot size, but we can still impose rules on setbacks and stuff like that.
But, sorry, a little more clarity. What was the percentages? It was like something about land use, so I'm trying to find my notes. Chelsea was saying it's like 70% for this and 30% for
Where, in that original ordinance?
No, in the,
Oh, in the,
just in the new way that we're approaching it, our code still has certain land use barriers, I guess. Like, what am I'm missing something.
what you were saying, Aaliyah, the,
Lot coverage, is that, are you referring to lot coverage?
Let me try to find my notes
Mm.
so I don't just waste our time. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, my minimally educated sense is that maybe lot coverage and setback are going to be the restrictive elements of an ordinance, and that's where the analysis that we talked about last time that planning could do, looking at what would be, the potential impact if we applied an ordinance that used our current zoning requirements, and then what would be the change if we were to reduce the setbacks or increase the lot coverage or whatnot. And that maybe can tell us whether those are restrictive or maybe they're not.
What I wrote down was 1 acre, 50%, low density, 35%, high density, 75%. What does that mean, Zach?
I think those are the density requirements. Yeah, your maximum lot coverage. You can't have no more than that percentage of the lot covered by a structure.
Okay, so that would kind of scale back the state's like anything, any lot goes, right? Because we have this minimum and maximum lot coverage percentages.
I'm not entirely sure.
Yes, it does place restrictions. I think what we don't know is how restrictive those are. And there's certainly an appetite to have restrictions in some regulations in place that align at some level with our current zoning. But we have, we can, and we talked about this last week, make some recommendations about where we think those could be more lenient to allow for broader adoption of ADUs.
Okay. But that is an existing barrier, as is height. Was that impacted?
probably, I mean, in our ordinance, we originally
Yeah, we
had
had 25,
that
right?
it shouldn't be, that the structure of like a accessory dwelling unit shouldn't be bigger than the like main house.
So 80%, I think, is
And
what
and that's that thing. I don't know for sure, like somewhere,
kind of has the height included in that. So it's based
yeah,
on the big house or whatever.
yeah, let's see. Yeah, it says, so this was like our appearance standards. Exterior appearance of the dwelling of an ADU shall be designed so the appearance of the structure maintains that one of a family dwelling and conforms to the look and scale of the neighborhood. And the ADU may not be bigger than the primary building. And then we had that thing in there about lot coverage, including the ADU may be no more than 80%, but that's where I think I understand that in the law from the state of Colorado, we aren't allowed to put that in. Because then somebody that just wants to do a conversion, am I misunderstanding and confusing the issue even more?
I think we can put restrictions on what size ADUs are allowed within a limit. There's a range of ADU size that's has to be allowed.
Zach, I think that was on the slide in the packet, not the matrix that you showed. And I don't know if, it's necessary to pull that up, but I'm just referencing that was in the slide deck that Fred went through with the 3 ordinances. And then on the piece about ADUs, it had some of the technical details. So I don't know if that'd be useful or valuable to pull up. I think it was like a 15-page deck. Yes.
Yeah,
And I
I'm just
think it was
reading it
on-
there.
If you
It's
scroll down a
on-
few slides to the ADU piece.
It's on that one too. The one above. It says jurisdictions may not disallow ADUs that are between 570, 750 square feet. So we have to allow ADUs in that size. We can allow them lower than 500 and greater than 750, but we have to at least allow them within that size range. 500 and 750 square feet.
Amy, are you feeling like that's answering your questions, or are we still sort of missing a few things?
Well, I mean, this is closer. I guess I'm just kind of, I like things spelled out so pedestrian because my brain just gets confused. So I'm trying to determine, what are the state requirements? How do we fill those in our own, within our own code, and what are the barriers within that code? Is what my brain is trying to figure out.
Reading here.
Zach, is there a map on the website that shows what the zones of the community are? Because so we could look at, these are high density zones, so those homes would be, those lot sizes would be with the 80% versus a low density zone. It was, it
Yeah.
changes, right?
Yeah, and I can bring it up real quick if you'd like.
I just wonder if that would be helpful to Amy, because it is a little confusing because there's a couple of different restrictions based on those zones. And so without, I don't know, in my head, without seeing the zone, it's hard to have a clear understanding. Just because I'm visual, but.
Yeah, visual as well. And then I think, even with the planning commission, there was some misunderstanding because they were like, how come I can't just what would preclude someone from just putting a bus, I think was the example, a school bus. It's like, well, the code would prevent that. Well, the code says exactly what. My brain needs to know. And then later I processed and I was like, oh, it's the kitchen unit and its own utilities. But, especially being the person who typically in the past couple of years has been the writer, the educator, like if I'm struggling, then that just, I'm not trying to put my vulnerability here out, but if I can't explain it, then,
No,
Dude,
you're
Amy, you're
Amy,
brilliant.
I'm the same
So-
way, Amy. I think it's those weird things, and I don't know if Nancy, if
do
you have
that.
any info or detail on that kind of stuff, or how to direct us to that.
I wish. And there's no one there from planning department tonight?
Yeah, Zach's here.
Okay, great. And I don't know if Zach was there for the land use, regulation or not when we were developing that, but a lot of that, whoever just put that map up. But yeah, planning is gonna should be able to provide a lot of information on this, but I'm sorry, I'm not very articulate when it comes to land use stuff.
But Crystal, you raise a really good point. And for me, the main takeaway from the City Planning Commission, and I think Fred and Zach are going to be working on this, is to size and forecast potential scenarios in terms of what you're describing. So as part of the education, one of the scenarios may be we envision across these different zones that there will be 5 ADUs built. And then that plays into the education with the hearts and minds of the folks. But right now, that storyboard is still, it hasn't been crystallized or baked.
Correct, yeah. And we've discussed this morning a bit about how we can kind of visualize what available space exists in Manitou. But since we are focusing a little bit on lot coverage percentages, it would involve kind of evaluating current use and what is remaining on that percent. But there's also how a particular lot is shaped as well. So there's a lot to it that we have to kind of look and see how we can best show the community kind of what ADUs in Manitou look like.
One of the other complications with you guys having to do that is that not everybody's houses are situated the way they're supposed to be on the lots. Like I know that we're looking to put in an ADU a couple of years ago and it was in the middle of the changes, but apparently we have 2 lots and how the houses are like we have a couple, like if there's a garage, but how they are on the lots because they're not aligned correctly somehow, we couldn't do it. And so it is a very big task.
It is, yes. And there's a lot of properties that they don't conform to modern land use development code. They just have existed that way for so long. So there's a lot of different attributes we kind of have to look at and different scenarios that have to be kind of evaluated.
And just to clarify, an existing structure, a garage, can be an ADU.
Correct.
Correct, yeah. So from this scenario analysis, and we all know forecasts can be wildly wrong, but at least there'll be something to support and inform the conversation is, I'm very curious to see if you forecast 2 years out, what percentage of ADUs would be within existing structures and what would be new builds? Because that would require a whole kind of socialization and education around that. So, yeah.
And I think the habitability guidelines that you brought up, Amy, that's a really great place to do some like education. Because one of the things that I remember that you guys had done right when I think right before I joined the board, was you had made recommendations about habitability guidelines for landlords. Because that has been a little bit of a concern. Yeah. And so I feel like those are some helpful things that could also help clarify that you guys already put them in place, which is awesome.
Yeah. I think, to help us all understand it, I think we have all of the information we need. It just, maybe we can look at organizing it in a different way. One suggestion is that what I heard from last week is that where we could help most is thinking about how we can encourage the affordability aspect of ADUs. And I think we made some suggestions about what we think should be considered in terms of the different regulations that could apply in the ordinance, and planning department is going to do some analysis there and put together some draft ordinances. And certainly if I think we would need some direction from you if there's anything in that realm that we could support with. But outside of that, I think us focusing on that affordability piece as a next step would be really helpful.
Yeah, that works with me. And Amy, I can ask someone to come in and maybe help us. I mean, I know we have our planning department here, but maybe we do need someone from some planner or somebody to help us with these parameter kind of stuff. So, taking just easing Zach and then maybe there's someone else like we used to have, I don't even know if he still lives here. He was helping with the ADU when I was reading through the notes. Yes. If he's still around or someone similar to that kind of background. I don't know. So anyway, so yeah, back to then, I guess, the affordability piece. I had proposed out of curiosity, could Manitou as a city incentivize people if they wanted to build a ADU on their property and deed it somehow to people of low income? Could we get, again, just throwing these out, I don't know anything about anything like that, but like a reduced tap fee or a allowance in an expansion to the variance or something, again, to meet that dedicated commitment to increasing 43 units of affordable housing in Manitou by 2026. So I don't know. What are people's thoughts around digging into that? And, I don't know what it costs to like connect my water line if I wanted to do an ADU. Is that expensive? And would the city, is that even something the city would manage and be able to like reduce?
Yeah, I think that when we're doing that, we need to be also considering what is the city budget? What is their current like revenue streams coming in so that we're not accidentally like shortcutting our resources? But also looking at where those, like, I think that's a really exciting place to go of trying to figure out what those are, but also like, we also have to understand the needs of the city government to operate and the capacity that our really small planning team has. Because like I asked if we had HAB and some of the other things, and we don't, there's some big questions there that we may not have the right capacity to be able to do some of those. So it probably means we have to get a little more creative. And I don't know, I keep thinking about the fact that the approval did not go through with CHAFA because it was not that high over the 55 units. And so trying to understand how do we get into some of those Prop 123 funds that could be used for a smaller community like ours, but we're kind of also lumped in to the suburban, right? If I'm remembering correctly. And so trying to figure out how do we get creative to like even approach the state to go, here's a different way to look at this, because we're not going to be able to build 100-unit place in Manitou. That's just not going to happen. But we absolutely need affordability in our community. So how do we start to play with that a little bit? That's probably, sorry, that's way off, but.
I mean, I'll second that. I think whatever we can bring, whatever education we can bring about Prop 123, and I know we've done research and we've had some presentations, and I admit I've struggled to really absorb what all that means and what we can and can't do, but maybe revisiting that and seeing what opportunities are there and maybe tailoring some recommendations as a result. Another idea, kind of building off yours, is what if there was some more leniency in things like setback if the building was affordability for affordable occupants in some way? That could be a way where there's, maybe there's a straightforward ordinance that is just, all right, you have to, if you're just doing an ADU, then you got to meet all of our existing existing zoning guidelines. But if you're doing an affordable unit, then you get X, Y, and Z. And, that would be a way to help people understand that, maybe make people feel more comfortable that a big developer isn't going to come in and just build a bunch of things for profit, because they would have to meet the affordability benchmark.
I feel like this is where I am showing my vulnerability and ignorance, is not understanding exactly what a setback is and the purposes of setbacks. I don't remember her name, but the woman who had previously lived in California, for me, brought up some really good concerns about some of the reasons why to keep some of that in place, so that we're not having, just building to building. And because I feel like that is also going to potentially stir up residents if they're like, oh, wait, what a minute. You guys have just said none of that applies. I don't know. There's just so much here, and trying to figure out, to Amy's point, how do we educate ourselves so that we can then educate our community so that they understand what's going on, instead of just getting angry about it. Not that I've seen a whole lot of that here, but I think there's enough of it in Colorado Springs that I've seen that it's like, okay, we need to be thinking ahead of time for how do we answer those questions so that we can keep it as smooth as possible.
Your instincts are spot on, in my view. There's incredible cultural sensitivities in our town of 5,000. That's that education piece.
Yeah, and like getting a clear message, because I know what you were talking about at planning, but that planning person took it as like that you were talking about that. I think he thought we were like advocating corporate building coming in. Did you sense that he got, that's the one when he got upset about like the buses. It's like, what's going to make it with these corporate people coming in and building and putting in a bus or a, like, and I think it was because he latched on to when you were using just how you just did sort of the definition of we don't want corporate coming in and planting these things in our community, but I think he heard it. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
I'm
not advocating for any kind of financing approach. What I was advocating, and it was reinforced, is that there is consistent alignment between every stakeholder. And you heard me mention to city planning, and then my expectation of city council is they can, to Amy's point, they can articulate and communicate exactly, or with as much clarity as they can, the approach that the city is taking and how they're thinking about it. And when you run those scenarios, my expectation would be you would definitely have corporate developers as part of a potential funding scenario. Like, that doesn't mean that we would be advocating for it, but my expectation is that would clearly have to be an option. It's sort of like the analysis wouldn't be complete if that weren't part of it, a part of the scenarios. And I think the city planning member, you could see, got sort of, yeah, and there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I think he hung on to that word, and that was like scary to him. That's all I'm saying. And that's that messaging that, again, when we have our presentation, we can talk about some ways that some of that NIMBYism and stuff sort of comes into play and how you dance around it. So,
One
ahead.
of the things that I heard one of you say, I don't remember which one, but you brought up that you expect city council members to be able to communicate to the community what that is. And this is just from my skewed perspective of where I work, of city council members not always listening to the experts who in our community would be Zach in our planning department. And so for me, I think about part of what our role could be and part of what, I don't know anything about planning, but I see with the planning group, if we can sort of translate what Zach in planning is like, here's what needs to happen. If we can translate that to Amy's point to that, we understand it, we make it clear, then we can help clarify it to city council. Because there's often too much conflict between the politics, the people who have the expertise and know what they're talking about, but nobody's listening to them.
All right, so what do we want to do then for, like, what did we say is helpful? Do we want to just table and continue talking about affordability and ADUs? And also, Amy, I'm going to try to get some speaker, somebody to help us, whether it is planning, I'm trying to not use their time. If we can find someone that also is familiar with all of those questions we have about setbacks and density and what that all means.
I think,
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, I mean, we can put together something that to present during a HAB meeting, if you guys want, that kind of goes over what each element is and why it's important and maybe even why it's important to Manitou, as a whole.
Yeah, that would be great. Like I said, I'm just trying again to
Well, I
dance
was
slightly and
thinking-
how much work I put on your plate. But that I do believe we all, I mean, Nancy, we all like said, Glenn, I don't know, do you know a lot about setbacks and variances and no. So I think we all would benefit from that. And I think it would help us in any of the work we're doing, just like with the project over there with Peregrine and their issues around the variance and why that got, denied. So.
Allison, if I could just say that a couple of things that council has expressed concern about in the past is one, that people will rent out people who do not reside there will rent out stuff. And so that's one concern. So, destroying the community fabric. And two is renting it out to people who don't, who will only be there temporarily, like a year or something, or, people who will just use it as a vacation home or something. So that's a big concern of city council. It won't actually go to people who are in need of affordable housing. So those are two things I remember from previous discussions. Thanks.
And the cool thing is we could put in there that it wouldn't be allowed to be a short-term rental, but with the state ordinance, we're not allowed to say it has to be like owner occupied. Did I hear that? Remember that right? That there was something that says we had originally in our draft ordinance put something in about the owner has to be occupied in one or the other, whether it's the main part or the ADU, and we're not allowed to do that. So that puts some constraints, and in council's thoughts, I think then incentivizing the deed of like the unit to be affordable could ease their mind, because it would be meeting a need of people that want to live or stay in our community, age in place, or come and live, whether it's the single person in the big house that wants to move to the ADU and then rent their house to a family member. I don't know. I mean, I guess they could still rent it as a high rent, but I don't know. It's hard to make all of those. And I know one of the planning individuals was saying, oh, we have to be careful because it's going to like cut off someone's sunshine in their garden. But I don't think we have control of that. I don't have control of that in my neighborhood when the developer came in and built a residential home that like now shadows, my yard. Like, Like, I don't think we have control over that. The things are like that are gonna happen. So go ahead, Amy.
I'm sorry if I interrupt. It's so hard to time it with the microphone, but one thing back to Aaliyah's point, like what can we do to help? I think I'm happy to volunteer to look at incentives for deed restricted codes and see basically how we can build this bridge from, from staff to council, okay, into the community. How can we be a bridge that says, I mean, I think this is kind of what I was trying to say is like, what's a hard no? Meaning like, what does our code prohibit? What is never going to happen? I really love, Nate, how you also come back to the forecasting, because I think that's a important piece, but it's also a heavy lift, and how can we support staff with that forecasting?
And yeah, I offered to Fred and Zach that to keep me on speed dial to help with the forecast. I've done more
Yep.
forecasting models than I care to think about. And so they know, and I think from a HAB perspective, I'm happy to take that on and be a sounding board and, roll up my sleeves, Zach, and for your team, there's some experience there that I think I can share.
Because I think that portion really dictates a lot of what bridges we're building, right? Because I suspect, as probably many of you do, that, we're looking at 40, 50 lot or potential cases here. We're looking at a really low number. And so that can kind of cut a lot of the noise by like, that's not even possible in Manatee kind of thing,
No, for sure.
Is there one of our Prop 123 contacts that we could reach out to help us understand if there's any resources through that program specifically for ADU development or, single family, single unit development?
I don't know any, but I'm happy to find out to see who we could contact from the Prop 123 to give us some guidance on that. That would be.
And then I was curious, I tried to bring it up with the planning, but I know we had a timeline. I know one of those bills was crossed off about the transit, and I know Fred had said it's not required, but we could do it. And I still think that it's worth digging into because the number 3 bus is the most used bus in the whole city. And we now have the Dillon Transportation Hub right there. Like, I wonder if when I was reading it again, I don't know the nuances, the details of what could be provided to the city, but when I first had read it, it sounded like if the city was willing to build affordable housing in a transit zone, the city would then gain some resources. Just to your point of saying, we know the city is struggling with resources with the changes of marijuana and such and numerous things. And perhaps digging into that. And I don't mind taking that on as my thing to really dig into it to see like what could, if we did follow that or come up with something, because that's the Peregrine place. And maybe there could be another conversion of some of those other motels that sit in that transit zone, the most busy transit in the city. The city might be afforded some resources. Sound good, Zach?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Any other discussion around this right now? It sounds like we have a few things. Amy's going to be looking into some, language. We're going to be looking into like maybe doing some forecasting, and then we're going to, Zach and the planning team maybe put together some slides. It doesn't have to be, I mean, if you can get it for the July meeting, great. If it needs to be pushed off or just shared to us like an email or something, that can happen on the, like Amy said, what's a never gonna happen? And then what are like, some of the parameters around the lot coverage and all those sort of allowance things. And then Crystal's gonna ask about Prop 123. I'm gonna dig into the transit thing. Did I miss anything else on this ADU discussion?
Can I just ask Zach, would it be what is more helpful for your department to, like, would it be more helpful to say, hey, here's where you go look up to get educated on this, and then you like be here to answer questions for us, or for you to put together a presentation?
I don't mind putting together a presentation that also outlines kind of where you can look. I mean, all of our land use development codes are online, but sometimes things do get buried on our webpage. So I'm okay with both. I think they go hand in hand.
Thanks for asking, Crystal. Crystal's are good. Like, she knows what it's like to work in a city, and she works in a very large city. So anyway, did I miss anything, Aaliyah or anyone else? Heard anything that we needed to task about? And then the affordability. That's, I think, all of our job as we're digging in research and seeing things around, like the component around, that's what we had said. Yeah, what could be something that the city or maybe cities have done nationwide that maybe we could do similarly here in Manitou related to incentivizing with city, I don't know, resources of somehow. So that's everyone's task, is to be, when you're waiting at the doctor's office, Glenn, or the the post office, or you could be Googling, I'm not calling you out. I was actually at the doctor today and was doing sort of some of my work there. So I'm just saying, as we're waiting, that can be a good Google. All right. Thank you all for your time. I think our next item is our presentation. If you're ready. I know Zach is going to put up the slides.
Sure, thank you. My name is Wayne Bland, and I was invited by Nate to come in and do a presentation about a project, an affordable housing, permanent supportive housing project that I was a part of for 3+ years, nearly 4 years, in Colorado Springs on the west side at approximately 19th and Uinta, a little north of Uinta. These slides give me an opportunity to really go deep into this, but I'm not going to because everybody will fall asleep. But I think there are some really good things, lessons learned in just the process that it took to get there. From what I understand, the development on West Colorado, the LaFawn tried to do a low-income housing tax credit, and that's what we utilize for our financing. So maybe that would help if I just kind of walked you through what we did and how we did it and that sort of thing, and some of the things we did right and some of the obstacles. Again, I don't want to bore you to death, but it was a fairly arduous process. And so I think the first thing is we had a really unique targeted population. So I am on the board of directors with The Place, and The Place is a nonprofit 501c3 in Colorado Springs, in the Colorado Springs area, so it does include Manitou Springs, for supportive services and offering housing services for unhoused youth and that's ages 15 through 24. We have a shelter, we have a drop-in center, we have outreach, which means we have folks that put backpacks on and go into camps and parks and here in Manitou Springs and walk the streets and approach people to see if they need any kind of assistance. And it's just that basic. So currently we have about 57 scattered site housing units that we place youth in. And so what scattered site means is they're all over town. And it can be an apartment, it can be a 2-bedroom, single-family house, it can be a 4-bedroom house. We provide support services for each one of those youth to help them create self-determined direction, and then we support them on how they get there. And we could go on and on about that. I'm going to be specific about this specific project and how it worked. And we did a ribbon cutting a couple of weeks ago. And as one of our speakers said, this project should have died 11 times, and it didn't. And I think the most important thing for me was it wasn't about the mechanism for us. For me, the North Star was about housing the youth. So I kept that focus and I kept that as the singular drive. I think oftentimes in these projects, people get hung up, not people, but maybe developers or even communities get hung up on what's the economic benefit? Can I make money doing it? And for us, the mission was much more important than just to build an apartment complex. It was to house youth. And so that kept us driving when other people would have said, no, we're not going to do this. So I'm going to talk about a few things. If we want to go to the slide that shows homeless youth. Back. Yeah, back. Forward. There you go. So that's our population is homeless youth. We built a 50-unit permanent supportive housing unit, and it's 47 1-bedrooms and 3 2-bedrooms. Their individual units, 1 bedroom is for 1 youth. We have common areas. The permanent supportive housing means that youth between the ages of 18 and 24 come in, they sign a lease, they pay 30% of their take home as rent. If they don't have take home income, then it's 30% of zero. But we work really hard. A part of what we do is try to help them get jobs and job training and further their education and help them project their lives so that they can go on from literally being on a creek under a blue tarp. And we have youth moving in Friday and Monday, and some of them came out of camps, and we support that for them. The 2 bedrooms are more for mom and dad and a child, a single mom, a parent with a child. We've got a single lady that's applied with a 6-year-old child, and she's pregnant. So those are the types of people that would typically occupy the 2-bedroom. We did we did several studies trying to get there. The first thing that we did, well, it's really interesting. I don't know if anybody knows, Shauna Kempinen was our executive director at the time. I'd served on the board for several years, termed off and had to sit out for a period. And she said, can you come back on the board? And I said, no, I want to get kids off the street. It's great to talk about all these lofty things and create objectives for us to accomplish in a dashboard. But my dashboard is we got to get kids off the street in housing. And so she said, I don't know how to do that. And I said, I don't either. but we're going to find out. And so it was just that curiosity that drove us. We hired consultants. We utilized someone else in the community, Beth Rolstad, who is Homeward Pikes Peak, the executive director. They just completed a couple of years ago permanent supportive housing. She gave us some really good direction. We hired some consultants that were experts in this type of development. The consultants gave us advice on how to hire a developer and how to interview the developer and what the role of the developer was. So this is funded through a low-income housing tax credit. That's the LIHTC, government's acronyms. This was a mechanism that was created in 1986 and then made permanent in 1993. And through tax initiatives and tax reform. And what it is, it's a public-private nonprofit partnership. The funding mechanism, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but the funding mechanism, it's not a government housing project. It's a private individual investor funded housing project. The partnership is just as it says. I think we all understand what tax credits are. When you do your income tax and you take your deductions, come over on the front page, you have a tax liability and a tax credit takes subtracted from your liability. We hear people that say, well, they're wealthy and they don't pay taxes. This is a mechanism that people don't pay taxes. They actually purchase tax credits as a bond. It's a 15-year bond that they purchase. They get tax credits off of the income they earn. They also get a return on their investment of 4 to 9%. So if you're wealthy and you have a lot of money, this is a really good deal. Plus, it provides housing. So that's a part of the funding mechanism. The states control, as you all have experienced, the states control who gets the award of the tax credit. And in Colorado, that's CHFA, Colorado Housing Finance Authority. And they award and designate whether it's going to be a 9% or a 4% tax credit. That being said, that tax credit allows the developer to sell those tax credits. So our organization, the place, does not own the building. The developer owns the building for 15 years. They bring the investment group to the table. They bring the bank to the table for the long-term financing. They own the building for 15 years. We have the first right of refusal and the first offer to purchase at the end of 15 years. We have received grants and funding from several sources, primarily from the Department of Housing, the Colorado Department of Housing, to the tune of about $3.5 million. Total project is $21 million. We turn around, they give us that as a grant, give us the place that as a grant. We turn around and loan that back to the developer to help pay for a portion of the building. At the end of the 15 years, that loan that we make them is still owed. So the price is discounted or forgiven by the amount that we made the loan. So that's how they pay the loan back, is they reduce the sale price. I'm not going to get way in the weeds any more than I already have. But, when people say, well, those are my tax dollars, they are and they aren't. It's not a direct contribution from the state or the federal government. The contribution comes through the investors that provide the money for that. The developer provides the on-site management. We provide caseworkers that help our youth succeed And that means that we teach them life skills. Some of the youth that come in won't even sleep in the beds because they've been sleeping on the ground. And so, or they've had a bad experience in the bed, and that's a trauma for them. We also, and so we selected a developer out of Kansas City, has a really good reputation. We've had a great working relationship through the process with them. We also hired an architectural firm out of Denver. We interviewed 6 architectural firms. The reason that we hired Shopworks is because they specialize and they have written protocol for trauma-informed design. And so that's a lot of big words, which means that they actually study things that are triggers or that create trauma for youth that have experienced homelessness or abuse. And so some of the things that we've done is we have an open area, so it's a communal area, so the youth can come and cook together. And again, the youth, these are young adults, 18 to 24. While I'm there and I'm thinking about it, that's the entry age, and that was the target that we wrote for the application to CHAFA. They cannot age out. So when they turn 25, when they turn 30, if they want to remain there, they're able to do that. So trauma-informed care means colors, line of sight, natural light, that sort of thing are important. One of the things that probably explains it as well as anything is most apartment complexes, the laundromat, the laundry is either in the basement or around the back with one door, and the youth won't use that if they've had trauma because that's a trigger. That's a setup for them to be taken advantage of. So ours is at the end of the common area open space with windows and sight, so they can see out and people can see in, 2 doors in and out. So that's a trauma-informed design that does not create that trigger. Another trauma-informed design is so you walk in the unit, there's a restroom, a typical 1-bedroom. Then you progress down the hall, there's a bedroom. There are no doors on the bedroom, no doors on the closet. Again, the youth don't want to be trapped or be in a situation where they're trapped. Their line of sight, their visibility, their ability to hear what's going on around them in surroundings is really important. So the bedroom is separated from the living room kitchen area by what we call a pony wall. It's about a 4 9" high wall. And then above that, it's open space. So it lets in, again, the natural light. It lets in the sound. So they don't feel, so that they're aware of what's going on in that whole unit. So I could go on, but that was really important for us with the population we were dealing with. We did deal with every government entity that we could, from the Colorado Health Department to the Department of Housing, Prop 123, CHAFA, El Paso County, the city of Colorado Springs. All of those provided funding and incentives for us to be able to do it. We do have a bank that was selected by the developer that specializes in low-income tax credits. There are a few banks in the United States that do that. It's very specialized. It's very complicated. There are, when we went to closing, there were 34 people on the telephone from all over the nation, and half of them were attorneys just to make certain everything synced up. But it was quite a stack. We call it the capital stack of how the thing got financed. And And then just community groups have come together to support us. One of the things that I think is really important, and it could be important for Manitou Springs to really look into, is the Pikes Peak Real Estate Foundation actually purchased the land for us. There's kind of a weird deal that you have to control the land, but you can't own the land before you start the process. The other thing is we were coming out of a piece of land that was inherited. And so there were two parties that inherited the land. One wanted to sell it immediately, and the other one wanted to hang on to it till the price went up. And so we actually put what's known as an option contract. So we had the option to purchase it at a point in time in the future. So that rolled, but we had to pay rent on that option to the tune of about $7,000 a month. And the Pikes Peak Real Estate Foundation, which is an affiliated sister brother organization of the Pikes Peak Community Foundation, came in and said, we will buy the land and we will sell it to you and at a predetermined price. And they're willing to do that because they knew that the value was there. And if we didn't take the property, that they could resell it or do something else with it. One of the things that they do that I think is really significant to help parlay some projects like this is they do what they call land banking. So they will give you the money to buy land, or they'll buy the land for you, and you have that so you can take that off of the table to begin the process. It's been around for several years. They separated from the Community Foundation 2 or 3 years ago. People, it's like any foundation, you invest in the foundation, you turn over your assets. Some of that's land. There's a 40-acre tract in Woodland Park that they own. There's some property out by the airport that they own. So people put land into the foundation and they hold it. Developers and other people also just put money into the foundation. So it's really helpful if you're trying to get started with a project. I won't go into any more detail, but we probably couldn't have done, I'm certain we couldn't have done it without their help and their input. So the next thing we have, the next box is zoning changes, density changes, variances, permit, all of that stuff with the city. So the property was zoned R5, which meant that by use, we had the right to use it for a 50-unit apartment complex. Actually, the density was 64 units we could have built on the site. We only built 50. The reason that we built 50 is that was the minimum that we could do for CHAPA, and they required us to do a feasibility study on the need. Many times for homelessness, HUD uses a barometer, a measure of a point-in-time survey, point-in-time count. And what that means is on one day in January, every city in the United States that participates with HUD does a count of the homeless population. And so that's what HUD utilizes for each community. That is vastly an undercount. Our school systems in Colorado Springs tell us we have, and so we came up with 168 unaccompanied minors in the survey that we used. Our school districts tell us we have 1,500 unaccompanied youth in Colorado Springs school districts. But that's why we utilized the 50 unit. We knew that, you know, we could show the demand, the need, that sort of thing. And so that's why we did the 50 unit. Again, it was permitted. We submitted the plans to the planning commission, or I'm sorry, the planning department endorsed it and says, we pass it. It's good. You met all the requirements. And the county regional building development, we go through that just like you go through it. And so we did the fire and the utilities and to make certain that we addressed all of the issues. But we had some pushback from the neighborhood. And so they appealed that decision from the planning department. I will tell you, we did something that's a little unique for a lot of developers. We went to the neighbors before we ever purchased the property or even started the conversation of purchasing the property. Our immediate neighbor to the north is Ruth Washburn Cooperative Nursery Center. And we asked them if it would be acceptable if we bought that. We didn't want to fight them. We wanted to do what they thought was best. And graciously, they said, you do the same work that we do. You work with older kids, we work with younger kids, but it's to help kids build their lives. And so, yes, we welcome you. And they were our first and our most ardent supporter. We knocked on neighbor doors for a 2-block radius. The people that weren't there, we left brochures saying what it was and who the developer was, front and back. So, and with 3 phone numbers so they could call. There was a lot of misinformation, as always, that goes out anytime you go into a neighborhood. And we wanted to educate the neighborhood on what we were doing. As it turned, and we had good response from the residential neighborhood. We had excellent response from the businesses. So that's where the Uinta Gardens, where this King Super is, Ace Hardware, Arc is in there, Walgreens, Rick's Nursery is in there. Anyway, we went to all of those, and obviously they wanted 50 more units in the neighborhood, number one. Number two, we had pushback from one business, but they also wanted employees, and they were willing to train employees. So it was employ our people for the jobs that they had. So a lot of misinformation happened in the neighborhood. Some people stirred up stuff saying that the soil was unstable. And, my retort was, okay, we're going to put 50 kids in a building and spend $22 million and it's going to slide off the side of the hill. No, we kind of did our due diligence before that. We had the CTL Thompson do the geotechnical work. The head of CTL Thompson wrote the geotechnical standards for the city of Colorado Springs. It's the standards that are used by the Colorado School of Mines, and it's a state standard. So anyway, you get into that, you're always going to have pushback. And even when people agree with you, sometimes they change their mind. Really, a couple of variances that we requested is in R5, you have to have 1.5 parking spaces per unit. And so that would have required us to have 75. We provided evidence that in other cities, the type of housing that we were building for youth, the youth don't have cars unless they were sleeping in them, and then they come in. They just don't have cars. And so the compromise was they increased our bicycle rack count so that we could offset that. And we're working with the nonprofit to have bicycle peak ride in front of the building. We were opposed by a group at every step of the way. It went to planning commission. Planning commission denied the objection. So they voted in our favor to move forward unanimously. It went to city council. City council, there were 2 dissenting votes. So we passed there. The group sued in district court for it not to be allowed. Of course, they had to sue the city because it was the city's process that allowed us to be approved. So they didn't sue us, they didn't sue the developer. And of course, that got basically tossed out without even going to court. But it's just, those are the types of obstacles that you go through to try and get to the end. The building is a green build. It does have solar power, a lot of open space on the outside. I think, I've gone through a lot of it. Our tenant selection is based on a very specialized criteria. There is a vulnerability index for homeless people that the continuum of care for El Paso County does. And the continuum of care is all the resources, all the service providers for homeless in Colorado Springs have come together. So it's homeless vets, it's homeless single moms, it's healthcare, it's mental health care, all of those service providers come together and they create an index of who is the most vulnerable. Those people move to the top of the list. And that's how the criteria is set for our housing. I think it does apply, this example, me going through this does apply to Manitou Springs. And the message that I came away with our project is that you have to just be persistent. And it was a deal where we said, we're not going away. We're going to make this happen. We've got to figure this out. And it was just that tenacity that did it. I think in a normal world, normal developers would say, well, this is too hard. Our developer stayed with us, hung in there. Community partners, the city was very encouraging. Both Mayor Souther and Mayor Yemi have been ardent supporters of our work. So we were able to get it done. And I think that there are probably ways to do it. I will say it's very unusual to apply to CHFA and get approval the first time. So I would encourage your developer, the city, whoever is helping with that, to go back to find out why they denied it. The other thing, it's very competitive. They only have a certain amount of vouchers that they can approve. And it was interesting because we were one of the few homeless youth, well, we were the only at that time, the only homeless youth project that they had done through LIHTC funding. So they moved us to the top of the list. We probably should have had 2 more tries at it, but they moved us up. And we applied for a 4% because we thought that'd be easier to get than a 9%. And they encouraged us to apply for the 9% so that it would go through and be funded. I mean, they really helped us in the process. So my deal is be persistent, don't be discouraged. Manitou Springs, I'm not telling you guys anything. It's unique, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's very desirable, it's charming. Everybody wants to live here. And so you will have a lot of high demand. I think you have to be really specific and really articulate on why you want to do affordable housing and who that population is. You have to really identify it. If you just say, we want to provide affordable housing for people that make less than 50% AMI, you probably won't get approved. And we probably wouldn't have gotten approved without a lot of things that we did without really good consultants. So anyway, I'm I'm open to questions. I've bored you to death and, and, yeah, it's interesting because some of the neighbors that objected to what we were doing have now come by. If you get a chance, you should drive by. It's 19th and you went to turn north on 19th. There's a lot of construction right now, but turn north on 19th and you'll see it. It's a 4-story yellow, orange, red building on the south face, and it has a butterfly, a release of 50 butterflies, symbolic of the number of buildings. I mean, the number of units done by an artist that specializes in murals. And it's, the butterfly is the you go through the stages, the metamorphosis to be born and take flight. And so that's kind of the symbolism there. I'm happy to do tours anytime as well. So any questions?
I mean, my immediate comment is what a privilege it is to have you here, and the civic leadership that you and Pam have shown is this is just stunning. Question: if Zach, if you go back to the prior slide. So in this storyboard with all of the different components that you touched on, in terms of degree of difficulty, was there any areas that were more challenging than others, or did each one of those boxes, they all had things that were relatively straightforward, operationally very complex?
We were really fortunate because we had an educated developer, an educated architect, and we also hired NES, which is a local real estate consulting firm that really shepherds a lot of things through the city of Colorado Springs for approval. So we had our ducks in a row. I think the hardest part for us was the pushback that we got. Some of it understandable. Some of it, the frustration for me is there were just blatant lies about what we were trying to do, who our population was, the geotechnical, the invention of false scenarios around the building, the geotechnical. It was a difficult site. It was supposed to be a 2-story building, kind of in the shape of, just think of a hockey stick, how, so it goes long and then there's a little curve at the top. We couldn't do that because the geotechnical challenges. And so that's why we built a 4-story building, and it's crammed up as close to the street as we can go and remain in or outside of the setbacks. But it's turned into a really beautiful project. So the difficulty is it was difficult at every phase. The support we got was just overwhelming. And once again, we were just on a mission. I mean, we had to do it to get the youth off the street.
Do you think the consultants that you worked with, do they have subject matter expertise in like the ADU space? Do you know? Have they driven?
They specialize in this, but they do, and so I come from a small town outside of a big city. And so I always hated when people said, well, in the city, we did it this way. But, Colorado Springs just went through an ADA ordinance deal. And I think that it'd be worth your time to really just sit down, especially with the planning staff, and what objections they ran into and what commonalities. Colorado Springs is a different cat because they're suing the state that saying you can't tell us what we can do for whatever reason. But Manitou's not necessarily in that camp, but I think there is some great expertise for ADUs. I can see both sides of that argument, and it makes a lot of sense in a lot of regards. By the same token, you don't want a density that creates havoc, or to your point about people utilizing it as my editorial, using it for vacation rentals or whatever. So you should maintain the integrity of Manitou Springs. I know you all have that in your heart, but this is a special place.
I just want to thank you for all of the work that you and Shauna and Becky and everybody on that project did. I remember listening to those city council meetings until 11 o'clock at night and going, oh my God, you guys are there in person, because I was screaming in my room with anger at some of the things that came out, which was one of the things was city council, some of the city council people were not listening to their own internal experts
Right.
and listening to some interesting people who did not have the expertise.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there are lots of lessons there for us to, like, I'm so appreciative, and I would love to hear way more of the processes because it's so informative to understand.
Well, I think anytime, especially, and I'm just going to say this in a public meeting, especially in a community like Colorado Springs, you have people that have definite agendas outside of what they're supposed to have. And they find ways to oppose things for whatever reasons. They also find ways to support things. So we did our homework, and that's one of the reasons we hired consultants up front and through different consultants through the process. We did a head count before we walked in there. We purposely delayed the meeting 1 month at one point in time because we didn't know if we had the votes, so that we could work on folks to just kind of explain it to them and educate them. It's a process, but once again, the goal was greater than all the stuff that we had to go through.
How did you finance the consultants? Was it from the place? Was it?
So it was really interesting. We contacted the consultants and they said, oh, well, Department of Housing has a grant that will pay for our fee if you apply. I mean, they were just very forthcoming. The developer, and that was up front for us to put the pieces together. Once we had the pieces together, the developer, Cohen Esri, paid the fee to get us through the consulting phase. And Andrea Barlow was our lead on that. And I don't know if you guys know Andrea. She is incredible. And she, I don't know that we could have gotten it done without her. She was just phenomenal and really sharp. She is from England, so she has this English accent. And she has a cartoon that the Independent did on her about 10 or so years ago. And it's Mary Poppins floating in with her umbrella, and it says, with a little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down. And that's who she is. I mean, she's really great. So we were fortunate to have her. Anything else?
Hi, Amy here. I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Bland, for coming and being a change maker in our community. That's so needed, and just for your persistence in helping our youth. I will say that my biggest takeaway is that one thing that keeps coming up is for us in Manitou is aging in place. And I feel like everybody, a large percentage of the community could get behind that. And I like what you were saying about tailoring and how you tailored, this to the 18, 24-year-olds, but still built in some sustainability for them. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for being here and telling us your story. It is really amazing. It sounds like you talked about, you did a lot of outreach to the community and businesses and you did have some opposition. Were you able to engage with any of the people or the organizations that did have opposition and through education, help them understand? And are there any particularly related to that, any lessons learned that you'd like to share with us?
So early on, because the plan was approved by the city development department, we were not required to have public meetings. We voluntarily had 2 neighborhood public meetings. We wanted to get out in front of false information. We wanted to educate people. It was interesting. We had our first meeting at Ruth Washburn daycare facility, and it was interesting to see people that wanted to throw stones and were not, and that were opposed to it, sitting in 5-year-old chairs with their knees up to here. It kind of leveled the playing field. But I think we probably should have done more of that. I think you cannot over-educate people. You cannot encourage them enough of what you're trying to do. That area has experienced a high level of a homeless population, and I think there was a genuine concern. Our retort was, we're giving people houses. So if they have houses, they're not homeless. We're providing resources for them to not be in chronic homelessness. That's one thing about youth, is most of the youth don't really see themselves as homeless. They see themselves in a situation. They don't have anybody to really support them. That's what our organization does. It kind of is that backstop for them. And when they fail, we can help them get back up. So I realized was a legitimate concern around increasing that. We're just moving in. One of the things we will talk to our youth about is they need to be good neighbors. There's a Methodist church there. They were tremendous advocates. And so we had factions in the neighborhood that were very positive, and we just tried to dwell and build off of that positive, and instead of arguing with the people that had bad information. So I think just the education and interaction with our neighbors.
Wayne, who were the people that primarily were like presenting that information? Were they like staff, or were they you or board members or developer? Who were the key messengers?
So staff did the presentation, City of Colorado Springs, Bill Gray, he's one of the head people in the development department, in the planning department. He presented, did a great job, cited the need, was well educated, stated the reasons that there was a need, but also stated mitigating factors on things that were considered objections. So I think he helped us really a lot going into each one of those meetings. He presented. Andrea Barlow with NES, who was a hired consultant, but she was phenomenal. She has her ducks in a row, and she did presentation. During public comment, we tried to get as many people as we could to speak in favor of it, including myself, other board members, other providers in the community, for homeless providers and healthcare providers, and educated people that really could articulate what housing young people, what incomes result from that. So we, and we still had a couple of city council people that voted no. So, but we won. And someone said, aren't you glad, to my wife, aren't you glad that that's over and it's built? And my wife said, it's just beginning, because now the work begins to help the youth build their own futures. So
Just connected to it, just with your CDAC, being a member of the board of CDAC, Community Development Action Committee. and
Advisory
I've
committee.
Advisory Committee,
in Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs. Can you speak directly? I know it's really on the housing needs assessment and sort of the goal there. And I don't mean to move this sort of sideways a little bit, but it may be helpful for this group just to hear some of CDAC's work with that.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're trying to do so the Community Development Advisory Committee was established by Mayor Southers and continued by Mayor Yemi, of citizen appointed people to study and advise the mayor and also help educate the council on the best way to utilize HUD funding. We've pivoted because we recognize that a lot of HUD funding may not be there. And our primary focus is on affordable housing to include homelessness. Amy Cox is head of that department with the city. Amy is a past city council person from Manitou Springs, has come up through the ranks in the city of Colorado Springs, went to San Diego, learned a lot, came back. She's one of my favorite people. She gets it. She is very smart and articulate. And so what we're trying to do now is it's so interesting because everybody has an opinion on how to end homelessness, and it's never the same. And to that point, we have put out a homelessness playbook, so to speak. But there are like 3 or 4 others. And one of the things we're trying to do now is to help convene all the resources to come together so that we educate each other and then have the same understanding of the message and how we need to implement solutions, and advise the mayor and the city council as policies are made. Even within, that's one of the things we talk about. The departments don't even talk to each other. The police department and the fire department, sheriff's department, they don't really, they all have different approaches on how to do their job and how to affect the situation. So anyway, that's one of the things we're trying to do now is have a larger community conversation and bring people together and share information so that we can come to an overall understanding instead of having these pockets of information.
So just a point of reference, in my opinion, one of the best things that Mary Yemi has done was last year, we started a homeless solutions team within the city of all of the departments. It's a combination of frontline kind of workers and the heads of the departments. And you are absolutely right. Sometimes we have cross purposes, because PD they have a very distinct role. Homeless outreach people, they have a very distinct role. And sometimes they can come into conflict. But it's also really exciting to have an opportunity to go, but you know what, we're all in this because we want people to get housed as the end goal. So like that is hopefully bringing us closer together so we can get that.
And very recently, one of the key things is we want to have small successes that are very visible to show that we, number one, care, that we're doing things, and that we're doing the right things. It's going to be really hard to solve homelessness. You know, there are all kinds of elements that feed into that, but I think just trying to eat the elephant one bite at a time and celebrate successes is a good way to start that and invite people in the conversation. You know, everybody wants to help in some way, just like everybody has an opinion. Not everybody, but a lot of people want to help, and we just need to give them a mechanism and the tools to do that. So anyway.
This is a tough question, but did you bring an extra water bottle to take a little of the mineral springs water back to the big city with you? That's my
Actually-
final question.
Actually left it in the car. And I realized that when I got in here, of course, Soda Springs. I'm only a couple of miles over here, so.
Awesome. Anyone have any other questions for Wayne? Yeah, awesome. What a gift to have you. Yes,
you.
thank you.
Sorry I took so much time, but I love sharing.
No, I appreciate it. And you articulate so well, like the words you use. And because, I'm in the, ending veteran homelessness field. So maybe you don't know that, but so yeah, I loved like listening and how the words you use and you speak so, lovingly to the youth about the youth, which, makes again, the project maybe move forward because people are so passionate about it. So thank you for your time, and it was awesome. And one day we'll make a tour, get over and tour it. So thank you. Cool. So I think that just the final things on our agenda are just any staff updates, and then if Nancy has any updates. And I guess I skipped if anyone else has updates that weren't on the agenda. So I think no. All right, Zach. Yeah, okay. Do you have any? You're good. And then Nancy, are you still on? Do you have any council updates? Okay. She might have hopped off. All right. Well, if I don't hear anything else, we'll just adjourn 7:10. Thank you all. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Everyone.